In this episode, I'll begin my review and reaction to the 1987 movie Wall Street. So let's take a trip down to Wall Street and get into this one. Wall Street was a sort of recommendation from a friend and didn't really know what to expect from this one. You've seen The Wolf of Wall Street, you've seen those types of movies. Would it be sort of similar to that? And I think this is a movie that sort of does predate. Well, obviously, it does predate Wolf of Wall Street, but it is kind of the original Wolf of Wall Street almost, with sort of a different mentor aspect to it. And I think it's kind of like a fusion between The Devil's Advocate and Wolf of Wall Street. I think would be a good way to describe it. And you know, it features Charlie Sheen in his prime of his career, just coming up. Michael Douglas. I haven't seen a lot of Michael Douglas movies, so it's interesting to see him as sort of this main character here. There's a lot of themes and sort of business savviness that you're trying to look for in this movie, trying to get the next step up. And I think it was an interesting look inside of Wall Street. What you always hear about Wall Street, is it really that busy? Is it really people that cut throat and stuff? So it's cool to take this 2 hours and 6 minutes diving into that sort of landscape there. I don't think it's the best movie, and it's described as a crime drama, which, I don't know if I'd say it's a crime drama, but it is what it is. And, I didn't think it was the worst thing in the world. I think there are definitely points that are entertaining. There was some stuff that we could have, sped along and made this a little bit faster of a watch, in my opinion. Director Oliver Stone, I know he's well known for a lot of stuff. I don't think I've watched any of his movies prior to this one, actually, but it is what it is. And I thought this was a solid movie overall. Nothing to rave home about, nothing to cry about. It was fun for what it was, and you get to see. For me, I never saw, the only Charlie Sheen I knew was when he was crashing out and stuff. So it was interesting to see him as like a true actor here, young actor, and kind of. We'll get into the story. So let's get into my thoughts and reactions. Spoilers ahead. So starting off this movie, we're coming hot. It's kind of this classic get to know your character through him doing something scene of Charlie Sheen's character, Bud, walking into work, and he's kind of this classic Wall Street hotshot, lots of yelling around. Granted, this is the 80s, this is 1987, so this movie takes place, around the 80s and that type of time. So I am curious about Wall Street now. How does it look 13 plus 20, almost 40 years later? Is Wall Street as busy as this? Or people still this cutthroat? I'm sure people still, well, we had the whole meme stock thing. So Wall Street's kind of just a joke at this point. I don't think it's actually a joke. It's very serious. But anyways, the introduction to this movie I thought was fine. Nothing to really hammer home or say that was like a super cool introduction. It's just him walking into work. We get to know Bud. He's kind of this guy who's kind of trying to earn his stripes. He's like mid 20s, maybe early 20s. Just got into this firm, trying to get the big fish out there and find something. And we meet his friend right away who sits next to him, who's kind of this, what's that word? Like a reference point throughout the movie to see how he's doing, because that's probably the career path that Bud should have stayed on. But with him going to do other ventures, it gets a little dicey there. We have the actor from Pursuit of Happiness, Chris's boss in that movie, is also just on Wall Street here, which Pursuit of Happiness, great movie. But it was funny to see him back in sort of a similar role of like the boss of a Wall Street firm. I guess he has a type for his acting pursuits. So interesting to see him here. I think he's less involved in this movie than in Pursuit of Happiness, but he's just a perennial Wall Street guy, so that's interesting. And doubly, in respect even more, Martin Sheen and Charlie Sheen doing this together, which, if you know Martin Sheen, but I always forget that he's Charlie's father. So it's interesting to see the actual father and son play out in the movie and in real life. So I'm sure that was fun to film for them. And, Martin Sheen seemingly is just kind of in it at the beginning of this like airplane representative, or he works for this airplane company, but he's actually like becomes much more involved later on in the movie, which we'll get to. But it was cool to see them their back and forth throughout the movie, and I thought that was cool casting too, to have them both as father and son, and now in the movie father and son. So that was a cool connection. I wanted to just note that. Basically, Bud, I mentioned he's kind of this rising grind guy, one of those young Wall Street hotshots trying to make it in the world. There's this other guy who he's really looking up to, Gordon Gekko, and he has called Gordon Gekko 59 days in a row. That's dedication, bro. And he finally gets the one meeting with him. I gotta respect the grind. Calling somebody 59 times, I'm sure back in 1987 was like borderline stalking, borderline. It's creepy now. Imagine when phones weren't really that relevant. And we walk into Gordon Gekko's lab. He's got like all the monitors set up. He's got everything all set up. So he's kind of this got it all going on, hot shot, knows the game type of player. And you can tell right away the dynamic between them is always going to be that admiration from Bud trying to be what Gordon Gekko is. And obviously, if you call someone 59 days in a row, you have a deep admiration for them. And yeah, so basically, we spend the first act kind of getting to know Gordon Gekko, and there's a couple things going on here where is kind of this slimy guy a little bit. Like you're maybe supposed to pick up on that, but we get into that with more of the tasks he sends Bud to go do. And Gordon Gekko lives the good life. He eats steak with an egg on top of it. He was making $800,000 a day, which if you multiply that for per year, he was making $292 million a year in 1987. Why are you still working? There's no point. Like that's put that into inflation, dude. I think that was a very egregious number. I don't know if that was like meant to be cap, but I was like, that's a shit ton of money. Holy crap, $800,000 a day. I did notice that Gordon always says, "I'll talk at you," never like "I'll talk with you." So we kind of know off the bat that Gordon's kind of an asshole, and you kind of have to be an asshole to make it in Wall Street, the typical tropes of that stuff. And I just thought that was interesting that he says, "I'll talk at you," and I think Bud's character actually picks that line up throughout the movie. So that was one I was keeping my eye on. He says, "I'll talk at you" to somebody later on in the movie, and so Bud has done a couple of under the radar deals for Gordon Gekko. I think the first one he is following a guy and sees that he's going to sell the stock, and then he knows that that stock's going to go down. Second time he breaks into a place office, gets like insider information, and knows that that stock's going to go down or up soon. So he's able to kind of will and deal these deals and make it into Gordon Gekko's trusted group. You have your people you can trust with a scam. So I guess that's that. And he makes it to the top. Bud does. But I knew when he was signing this deal, and I have my LeBron. I knew Kobe was going to drop 81 moments. I knew that once he signed this power of attorney deal, he was going to get scammed out of it. And yeah, you just never sign anything you don't know. Probably should have got his own lawyer or something. It was just obvious that this was going to play a big factor later on in the movie. Power of attorney seems like just a scam overall, in my opinion. Represent yourself, Bud Dwyer. It's not Bud Dwyer, Bud something, I don't know. Essentially, Bud has kind of run out of schemes. Well, he wants to make his next big scheme using his father's airline company and sort of get him and Gekko in the door as this leaders, or they're on the board or something of trustees to basically run the company, save them from their board that they don't like now. And they bring this idea to his father, who's supposed to be on his side, was supposed to be like the liaison between him and the company, and he doesn't want to do it. And this was a cool kind of flip of the switch here, where it seems like he should be the one to be like, "Oh yeah, help my son," but he's like, "Fuck you, I'm out of here," and he rages at them. He's like, "I don't like this deal at all." And then Bud gets in the elevator with his dad. Very awkward elevator ride down. You could feel the palpable tension of just awkwardness there. And yeah, so continuing on, making it to the top, there was this girl that Gordon had let Bud have. And second movie review in a row where I'm talking about a girl who was being paid off. We were talking about that too for the money. This girl was in it for the money, just wanted to rise up with Bud, and then as soon as he sort of loses out on the money because they have a breakup after Bud finds out that Gordon is going to scam his way into the airline and just kick Bud out basically and just throw him away, which obviously is rational for making him upset. And then once that happens, he tells the girl like, "I'm gonna be out of money probably, and like Gordon Gekko's probably gonna get the best of me, and we're not gonna be rich anymore." She's like, "I'm out of here," and it was obvious, that was kind of gonna happen. But unfortunate for Bud, he's kind of just going through it all right now. He tries to go on his revenge arc, and I really my favorite scene in this movie was when he's putting in all this groundwork to get Gordon Gekko out of the airline and try and get his revenge back and try and retake control of the company. Sort of. I don't know. It's kind of like a weird legal system following there, like following what's going on in specific. But my favorite scene is when he's walking to the office. Everything's normal. Everything's chill. He's like, "Hey, what's up?" But you can kind of tell there's something off in there. Like people are just kind of looking at him. Music was pretty good, I think. He finally like talks to everybody, gets to his desk, and then he gets arrested for the insider information with his friend at that other firm that he stole when he broke in. So I thought that was a really well done scene there, and my favorite scene of this movie. But continuing on, basically we got to wrap it up here, and I like this one is I think the ending was actually really strong in this movie, where the middle, like probably the middle, like from like the first, I don't know, I think the beginning of this movie is pretty weak to be honest, but like it's a ratchet it up, by the end it gets pretty good. We see Bud get arrested, and then all of a sudden he's meeting Gecko in a field in the middle of a raining park. So he basically is trying to get Gecko to talk some sense into him, or just let Gecko have at him. And Gecko's such an asshole and so cocky that he reveals a couple things. And Bud was wearing a wire, which doesn't really free him, leading to this sort of ambiguous ending. Which I'm not sure if I love this ending. We can talk about it, but basically he was wearing a wire trying to implicate Gecko, which kind of defines the whole relationship. Is Gecko just used him, and then when he couldn't use him anymore, didn't have any use for him, kind of just was ready to cast him aside. And then now Bud is like trying to get his revenge. He's able to pull off his revenge, so our guy kind of wins by getting Gecko implicated. But it's sort of an ambiguous ending where they're driving to the courthouse. He's with his parents, and they're like, "You might go to jail, you might not." But yeah, that's just Wall Street, I guess. Just don't get yourself involved in scams. I think key takeaways here is just be yourself and don't try and you know be somebody else who's this like crazy guy. Like you can only really control what's in front of you. Ambiguous ending, I didn't really like that. I think we should have seen like either he goes to jail or he gets off. I don't think it should have been like, oh, is he gonna go to jail? Because like it doesn't really fucking matter. Just tell us. Like I'm not thinking, laying my head at bed at night thinking, did Bud go to jail or not? It's like, okay, did he or did he not? I don't really care for the ominous ending. My guess, since we have to fill in the blanks here, I think he would have gone to jail for like 2 years and then probably never been hired on Wall Street. Probably work in the airline with his dad is my guess once he got out of jail. There you go. There's your ending. I think that would be fine. So overall in this movie, I thought it was pretty interesting throughout. Some of the aspects are pretty cool. Some of it is pretty outdated. But there is some. I really like the relationship development between Bud and Gordon Gekko. Michael Douglas and Charlie Sheen both did a pretty solid job in this one. I just thought the first half or so of this movie was pretty sleepy in my opinion. So I'm going to give this one a 7.3. Pretty decent score for Wall Street. 80s movie, pretty classic 80s tropes in there too. And I thought this one really ratcheted up at the end. I thought the ending was pretty interesting, and the last couple scenes were really good, but the lead up to that was sort of meh. So that's where I land on Wall Street at a 7.3. So where does this movie relate into the other movies we've reviewed so far on the DubCast? This comes in at number 69, nice, of 97 movies reviewed so far, tying Man on Fire. I think between the two, I would slightly prefer this movie over Man on Fire. Obviously, both 7.3s, but we'll take Wall Street there. This does beat out Blade Runner, which was a 6.7. Daryl Hannah in both of those movies it does fall behind Catch Me If You Can, which was an 8.6. Two Martin Sheen movies, now the lowest ranking Martin Sheen movie. This does beat out All the President's Men, which is a 5.2. Hal Holbrook in both of those movies. And then finally, this does fall behind Peaky Blinders, The Immortal Man, which was an 8.4. Both of those movies classified as crime dramas. What do you guys think of Wall Street? Let me know down below in the comments. Is this a classic? Is this a cult classic? Am I offending people by only giving this a 7.3? Let me know down below what you agreed or disagreed with throughout the film. Coming up in the Dubcast, we got more movie reviews. Next movie review will be Fantastic Mr. Fox TV show. We got Survivor 50 content flowing. Every week we'll be trying to get my episode out as the same night the episode airs. And then besides that, sports content, UFC numbered events, NBA playoffs coming up soon. So stay tuned for everything on the Dubcast. You never know what you might see. So make sure to subscribe, like, comment, dislike, do what you got to do. And as always, be easy, y'all.